My father was an imam, but when all six of his sons began seeing the same mysterious figure, our home turned into a battlefield of faith. Stay till the end because what happened next changed everything, and don't forget to share your location, like and subscribe. My name is Amir Khan, and I grew up in a small, crowded neighborhood in Lahore, Pakistan, at 17 Railway Colony Road. Life there was simple but also strict. In our home, faith was not just a belief, it was our identity, our duty, our breath. By the time I was 12, I already knew many religious teachings by heart. My father made sure of that. Every morning before school, I sat with him and my older brothers, 5 of them, all following in his footsteps. We studied, recited, and memorized. There was no room for questions, only obedience. But everything began to change on a night I will never forget. It was during the rainy season. The electricity had gone out again, and the whole house was wrapped in darkness except for a small lantern in the sitting room. My brothers were gathered there, speaking in low, serious voices. I was not supposed to be there, but I stayed hidden near the door, listening. I heard my eldest brother, Yusuf, say something that made my heart race. He spoke about a dream he had. He said he saw a man filled with light standing in front of him. The man did not speak like a stranger. He felt close, almost like he knew him. Yusuf said he woke up shaking, unable to forget the face. My father was silent for a long time. That scared me more than anything. He was not a man who stayed quiet. Then my second brother, Imran, spoke. His voice was trembling. He said he had been seeing the same figure, not just once but many times. He said the figure brought peace, something he could not explain, something different from anything he had ever felt before. At that moment, the room felt heavy, like something unseen was present. My father finally spoke. His voice was low but firm. He warned them not to speak such things again. He said not every dream is from God, and some things are meant to test faith. He told them to pray more and stay focused, but I noticed something that night. Even though my father sounded strong, his eyes were not. They were troubled. That night I could not sleep. I lay on my mat, staring at the ceiling, thinking about what I had heard. I kept asking myself, who was that man of light? Why were my brothers seeing the same thing? And deep inside me, something small but real began to grow. It was not fear, it was curiosity. I did not know it then, but that night was the beginning of a journey that would change everything about my family and about me. After that night, things in our house did not go back to normal, no matter how much my father tried to keep everything under control. At first, it was quiet. Nobody mentioned the dreams again, especially not in front of him, but I could see it in my brothers' faces. Something had changed inside them, something they could not hide no matter how hard they tried. Even during our morning studies, when we sat on the thin mats with our books open, their voices were no longer as strong and steady as before. They would pause, lose focus, and sometimes stare into space like they were remembering something too deep to explain. A few days later, I was sitting outside in the small courtyard behind our house, trying to finish my school assignment. The air smelled of wet earth, and children were playing somewhere down the street. That was when my third brother, Hamza, came and sat beside me. He was usually cheerful and playful, the one who joked the most among us, but that day he looked serious, almost afraid. He did not speak for a while. He just sat there, watching the sky slowly turn orange as the sun began to set. Then he finally spoke in a low voice, asking me if I had ever seen something I could not explain. I told him no, but I asked him why he was asking. He looked around to make sure no one was listening. Then he leaned closer and told me that he too had seen the same man Yusuf and Imran talked about. He said it happened while he was awake, not even in a dream. He described how the room became bright, even though there was no light, and how the figure stood near him. He said he felt no fear at all, only peace, like a heavy weight had been lifted from his chest. As he spoke, I felt something strange inside me, like a mix of fear and wonder. I wanted to believe him, but at the same time, I remembered my father's warning. I asked him what the man said, but Hamza shook his head slowly. He said the man did not speak with words like we do, but somehow he understood things clearly in his heart. He said he felt love, forgiveness, and a kind of truth he had never known before. That same week, my fourth brother, Bilal, and the fifth, Kareem, began acting differently too. It was no longer just one or two of them, it was all of them. They became quieter, more thoughtful, and sometimes I would catch them sitting together in a corner, talking in whispers. Whenever I walked close, they would stop immediately, as if they were protecting something important. My father started noticing as well. He began watching them closely, asking more questions, testing them during studies, and even waking them up at night for extra prayers. He was trying to bring things back to how they used to be, but it was not working. There was a tension in the house that could not be ignored, like a storm building up slowly. One evening everything came to a head. We were all gathered in the main room after dinner. The lantern light flickered, casting shadows on the walls. My father sat at the center, and one by one he called my brothers forward. His voice was calm, but there was a sharpness in it that made my heart beat fast. He asked Yusuf directly if he was still having those dreams. There was a long silence before Yusuf answered. He did not deny it this time. He said yes, and not only him, but all of them had experienced the same thing. He said they could not ignore it anymore because it felt too real, too powerful to be just imagination. The room went completely silent. I could hear my own breathing. My father stood up slowly, his face filled with anger and something else I had never seen before, fear. He began to speak strongly, warning them again, telling them they were being misled, that they were allowing confusion into their hearts. But this time, my brothers did not look down or stay silent. They stood there listening but not shaken. Yusuf then spoke again, his voice steady but respectful. He said they were not trying to rebel or disrespect him, but they could not deny what they had seen and felt. He said something inside them had changed, something they did not choose, but something that felt true. At that moment, I realized this was no longer just about dreams. This was something bigger, something that was beginning to divide our family. That night, as I lay on my mat again, I felt the same question growing stronger inside me. Why was this happening to my brothers? And deep down, I began to wonder something that scared me even more: would it happen to me too? After that confrontation, our house changed completely. It was no longer just tension you could feel quietly in the air. It became something open, something heavy that followed us everywhere. My father became stricter than ever. He watched my brothers closely, corrected every small mistake, and increased the hours of prayer and study. He believed discipline would bring them back. But the more he pushed, the more I noticed something surprising. My brothers were not breaking. Instead, they were becoming calmer, almost peaceful in a way I had never seen before. What made it harder to hide was how their behavior began to change in everyday life. Yusuf, who used to be very firm and serious, started showing kindness in small ways that stood out. He would help neighbors without being asked, speak gently even when others were rude, and spend long moments alone, not just praying but thinking deeply. Imran, who once argued a lot, stopped raising his voice. Hamza, who loved jokes, became quiet but not sad, just thoughtful, like he had found something more important than laughter. I started noticing something else too. Sometimes, late at night, I would wake up and see one or two of them sitting together, not speaking much, just reflecting. One night I gathered courage and sat with them. Nobody chased me away. Yusuf looked at me and asked softly if I was afraid. I did not know how to answer. I told him I was confused. He nodded slowly, like he understood exactly what I felt. He began to explain, not forcefully, but gently. He said what they were experiencing was not something they went looking for. He said it came to them again and again, bringing a sense of truth that felt stronger than fear. He said they were not trying to leave what we had been taught, but they were beginning to see something clearer, something deeper. I asked him again about the man they kept seeing. This time he did not avoid it. He told me that the figure had made something known to him, something about love, forgiveness, and a new way of knowing God that was not built on fear, but on relationship. He said it was difficult to explain, but it felt like light entering a dark room. Hearing that made my heart beat faster. Part of me wanted to run away from the conversation, but another part wanted to understand more. I realized then that the secret they were carrying was no longer just theirs. It was slowly pulling me in too, but the truth was, secrets like this do not stay hidden for long. Our neighbors began to notice the changes. People who respected my father started asking questions. And in a place like ours, where reputation means everything, even a small suspicion can grow into something dangerous. The pressure was building, and I could feel it. Something was coming, something that would force everything into the open, and deep inside me, I knew our family would never be the same again. The day everything came into the open did not begin with shouting or trouble. It started like any normal day in our neighborhood at 17 Railway Colony Road in Lahore. The call to prayer echoed through the streets, shopkeepers opened their stalls, and people moved about their routines. but by afternoon something shifted, something that could not be taken back. A man from our area, known for always watching others closely, came to speak with my father. I was in the next room when I heard their voices. At first they spoke quietly, but then the man's tone became sharp. He said people were talking. He said my brothers were acting differently, saying unusual things, and spending time in ways that raised concern. He warned my father that such behavior could damage his reputation as an imam. My father did not respond immediately. When he did, his voice was controlled, but I could hear the tension in it. He called for all my brothers to gather in the main room. I followed quietly and stood near the wall, my heart beating fast. One by one, my brothers stood before him again, but this time it was not just a family matter. The weight of the community was now in the room. My father asked them directly, in a stronger tone than before, if what people were saying was true. He wanted clear answers, not silence. Yusuf stepped forward. He did not look afraid. He spoke respectfully but firmly. He said they had experienced something real, something they could not deny anymore. He said it had changed how they understood everything, including their faith. The room felt tight, like there was no air left. The man who came to report them shook his head and stepped back, clearly disturbed. My father's face grew hard, his eyes filled with anger and disappointment. He spoke about honor, about truth, about staying on the right path, but this time his words did not bring fear into my brothers like before. Instead, there was a silence that spoke louder than anything. What shocked me most was not what they said, but how they stood. They were not fighting him, not disrespecting him, but they were no longer shaken by him either. It was like they had found something stronger than fear. That moment spread beyond our house faster than we expected. By evening, neighbors began whispering. Some avoided our home, others stood at a distance, watching. The respect my father had built over many years was now under question. That night, no one spoke during dinner. The silence was heavy. I looked at my father, and for the first time in my life, I saw him not just as a strong leader, but as a man struggling with something he could not control. And as I lay down to sleep, one thought stayed in my mind. Now that everything was exposed, there was no going back. After that day, fear settled into our house like a silent visitor that refused to leave. It was no longer just about my father and my brothers. The whole neighborhood had begun to react. Some people stopped greeting us. Others spoke in low voices when we passed by. A few even came to our door not to support us, but to warn my father that things could get worse if this continued. Inside the house, everything felt different. The warmth we once had as a family slowly faded. My father became quieter but not peaceful. It was the kind of silence that carried anger, confusion, and deep disappointment. He spent more time alone, sometimes pacing, sometimes sitting still for long hours without saying a word. When he did speak, it was usually to correct, warn, or remind my brothers of who they were supposed to be. But my brothers did not return to how they used to be. Instead, they became even more calm. That calmness confused me. I expected them to be afraid, to change their minds, or at least to pretend, but they did none of that. Even when tension rose, even when my father's voice became heavy, they stayed steady. It was not pride, it was something else, something I could not fully understand. One evening, things became more serious. A small group of elders from the area came to visit. These were men my father respected deeply. I sat quietly in the corner again, listening. They spoke about reputation, about influence, and about how dangerous it could be if word spread further. They advised my father to take control quickly, to correct what they believed was going wrong before it brought shame to the entire community. I watched my father closely. He listened to them, nodding at times, but I could see the pressure building on him. It was no longer just about belief. It was about honor, leadership, and everything he had worked for. That night after the elders left, my father gathered my brothers again. His voice was not loud this time, but it carried weight. He told them they were putting the family in danger, that they were inviting trouble not just on themselves, but on all of us. He warned them that the path they were choosing could lead to rejection, loss, and even worse. As he spoke, I felt fear grow inside me. Not just fear of what people might do, but fear of losing our family as we knew it. I looked at my brothers, hoping to see doubt in their faces, hoping they would change their minds and make everything normal again. But they did not. Yusuf stepped forward again, calm as always. He did not argue, he simply said they understood the risks, but they could not deny what had been made known to them. He said truth does not disappear just because it is difficult. That moment stayed with me. It was the first time I realized how serious this had become. This was no longer about dreams or private experiences. This was a choice, one that could change everything. That night I could not sleep at all. Every small sound made me alert. Every thought felt heavy. And deep inside, I began to feel something I had never felt before, not just curiosity anymore, but a quiet pull, like something was calling me too. A few nights after that, something happened to me that I could not explain, something that made everything my brothers had been saying feel real in a way I was not ready for. It was very late and the whole house was quiet. Even the usual sounds from the street had faded. I was lying on my mat, awake but not thinking too much, just staring into the darkness like I had done many nights before. Then suddenly I felt something change. It was not a sound at first. It was a feeling. The room, though still dark, did not feel empty anymore. I cannot explain it properly, but it was like the air became calm and heavy at the same time. My heart started beating fast, but I was not afraid the way I thought I would be. I wanted to move, but I stayed still. Then I noticed a soft light. It was not like the light from a lantern or the sun. It was gentle but clear enough that I could see it forming near the corner of the room. My eyes were wide open now. I thought maybe I was dreaming, but I knew I was awake. The light grew stronger, not hurting my eyes, just filling the space slowly, and then I saw a figure. I cannot describe the face clearly, but I knew it was the same kind of presence my brothers had been trying to explain. There was no fear in me. Instead, I felt something I had never felt before, peace, deep and steady, like everything inside me had become quiet. The figure did not speak with words the way people do, but I understood something clearly in my heart. It was like thoughts were being placed inside me, not forced, but gently revealed. He let me know that I was seen, that I was known, and that I did not need to be afraid of truth. He made me understand that what my brothers had been experiencing was real, and that I too was being called to see beyond what I had always known. Tears started coming down my face, but I did not even know why. It was not sadness. It felt more like something inside me was opening for the first time. I do not know how long it lasted. It could have been minutes or longer, but slowly the light began to fade and the room returned to darkness again. Everything looked normal, but I knew nothing was the same anymore. I sat up, breathing deeply, trying to understand what had just happened. My heart was still racing, but inside there was also a strange calmness. I was not confused like before. I was not just curious anymore. Now I knew. The next morning I looked at my brothers differently. They looked at me too, and without me saying anything, Yusuf seemed to understand. He did not ask questions. He just gave a small nod, like he had been waiting for this moment. But with that understanding came something else. I knew this would make everything even harder. Because now it was not just them. It was me too. After that night I could not pretend anymore. Everything inside me had changed, even though nothing outside had yet. I still woke up early, still sat with my father and brothers for studies, still followed the routine I had known all my life. But now, every word I heard, every teaching I repeated, felt different. It was like my heart was no longer fully connected to it the way it used to be. I tried to keep it to myself at first. I was only 12 and I understood the danger around us. I had seen how people were already reacting to my brothers. I knew that if my father found out about me too, it would break something deeper in him. So I stayed quiet, watching, listening, and thinking, but it was not easy. The peace I felt that night did not leave me. It stayed with me, even in the middle of fear. Sometimes when I sat alone, I would remember that moment, and it felt so real, so clear, that I could not deny it even if I wanted to. I began to understand why my brothers stood firm the way they did. It was not stubbornness, it was certainty. One evening, Yusuf came to sit with me again. This time, I did not hide anything. I told him everything that happened to me. As I spoke, my voice was low, but my heart felt lighter. He listened carefully, without interrupting. When I finished, he placed his hand gently on my shoulder and told me that I was not alone, that what I had experienced was part of something bigger than all of us. He told me that now I had a choice to make, not a choice forced by anyone, but one that had to come from inside me. He said I could ignore it and try to return to how things were, or I could accept what had been made known to me and follow it, no matter how difficult it might be. That choice stayed in my mind all night. I thought about my father, about our home, about the life I had always known. I thought about the fear, the pressure, and what people might do if things went further, but I also thought about that peace, that truth I had felt so deeply. By morning, I knew my answer. I could not turn away from it, but as soon as I accepted that in my heart, I also knew something else. This decision would cost me more than I was ready for. The day I finally spoke was not planned. I did not wake up that morning thinking I would say anything. In fact, I told myself I would stay quiet for as long as possible. But sometimes the truth inside you grows so strong that silence becomes harder than speaking. It happened in the evening, just after we finished our usual gathering in the main room. My father was already on edge that day. News had spread further in the neighborhood and more people were talking. I could see it in his face. He was carrying pressure from everywhere, his position, his reputation, and the fear of losing control over his own household. He called my brothers again, asking them questions, pressing them to reconsider, urging them to return fully to what he had taught them. His voice was not as loud as before, but it was heavier, filled with frustration and pain. My brothers stood there quietly, answering respectfully, but not changing their position. As I stood at the back of the room, something inside me began to rise. My heart started beating fast, just like the night of my encounter. My hands felt cold and my thoughts were racing. I knew what I was about to do would change everything. Before I could stop myself, I stepped forward. The room went silent immediately. My father turned and looked at me, surprised. I had never spoken in moments like this before. I was always the quiet one, the youngest, the one who watched and listened. My voice shook at first, but I forced myself to continue. I told him I had something to say. I could feel everyone's eyes on me, but I did not step back. I began to explain slowly, carefully. I told him that what my brothers had been saying was not just their experience. I told him that I too had seen and felt something I could not deny. I explained it the best way I could, saying that it was not confusion or imagination, but something real that had been made known to me deep inside. As I spoke, I avoided sounding disrespectful. I did not argue or raise my voice, but I did not take back my words either. The look on my father's face changed in a way I will never forget. It was not just anger this time. It was shock, deep and heavy. It was like the last person he expected to hear this from was me. The room felt still, like time had paused. No one spoke for a moment, then everything shifted. I had crossed a line that could not be undone, and in that moment I knew our family was about to face its hardest test yet. After I spoke, nothing in our home was the same. The tension that had been growing for months finally exploded, though not with loud shouting or anger. It was quieter than that, but heavier, like a storm pressing down on every wall, every corner, every heartbeat. My father stopped speaking for long stretches. He moved around the house silently, correcting small things, reminding us of duties, yet never looking directly at us. His disappointment was not just in words, it was in every glance, every sigh, every small shake of his head. The neighbors' whispers became harder to ignore. People who once nodded politely now turned away or avoided our street entirely. My father's reputation, built over decades, seemed fragile in ways I had never imagined. My brothers and I could feel the weight of every look, every word spoken outside the walls of our home. Yet at the same time, something inside us had grown stronger. We were no longer afraid to stand quietly in our truth, even as the world pressed in. One afternoon, my father gathered us all in the main room again. His voice was heavy, but controlled. He spoke about honor, about obedience, and about the danger of refusing what had been taught from childhood. My brothers listened silently, as they always did now, but I could see it in their eyes. They were no longer afraid. They had something deeper holding them steady. I realized with a mixture of awe and fear that I shared that same strength. He paused, his gaze lingering on me. I felt the weight of his love and his disappointment at the same time. I could see him struggling between holding on to the family he knew and accepting the change he could not fully understand. I felt a pain inside me for him, for all of us, knowing that following this path would not be easy. That evening, after he left the room, Yusuf came to sit beside me. He did not speak at first. We just sat quietly, listening to the sounds of the neighborhood outside, the distant calls to prayer, the soft rustle of the wind against the windows. Then he said something I will never forget. We cannot turn back now. We must keep going, even if it costs everything. At that moment, I understood fully that this was not just about seeing or feeling something miraculous. It was about choosing to follow what had been revealed to us, even when the consequences were frightening. I felt fear, yes, but I also felt courage, a courage that came not from myself, but from something greater guiding me from within. That night I prayed silently, asking for strength, for clarity, and for protection. I could sense that the journey ahead would be full of trials, conflict with my father, judgment from the community, and even personal doubt. But I also knew something powerful. No matter how difficult, this path was real, and it had already changed me from the inside out. And in that quiet darkness of my room, I made a decision I knew would define the rest of my life. I would not deny what had been revealed to me. I would not hide. I would follow even when it was hard, even when it brought fear, isolation, or sorrow. The days, months, and years that followed were not easy. Our family faced challenges that tested every part of our hearts and faith. My father struggled with anger, disappointment, and fear, but over time he began to soften, slowly understanding that what had been revealed to us could not be ignored. Our neighbors remained cautious, some even hostile, but the truth we had experienced in our hearts gave us a peace that could not be taken away. Looking back now, I realize that the most important lesson of my journey is this: faith is not about fear or obedience alone. It is about listening deeply, trusting what God reveals, and having the courage to follow even when the path is unclear. I learned that standing for truth may cost comfort, respect, and approval, but it also brings clarity, peace, and a connection to something far greater than ourselves. To anyone reading my story, I want to say this: your journey with God is personal, but it is also powerful. Love one another, even when it is hard. Pray consistently, not just with words, but with your heart fully open. Study God's word diligently, because it will guide you in moments when fear or doubt feels strongest. And never underestimate the small voice within you, the one that draws you closer to truth. I encourage every believer to trust the journey, even when it is difficult. Do not ignore what God reveals to you, and do not be afraid to stand firm in your faith. There will be trials, there will be fear, and there will be moments of uncertainty. But in those moments, hold fast to love, to prayer, and to the truth of God's presence in your life. If there is one thing I have learned through everything, from the whispers in my house in Lahore to the quiet encounters that changed my heart, it is this: when you follow God fully, even in fear and uncertainty, you find a peace that surpasses understanding. And that peace can carry you through the darkest nights, through the heaviest trials, and into a life that reflects the love, grace, and truth of God in every step you take.